Hello, I'm Al. You're tuning in to Short Rest, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the Battlesmith Artificer. This subclass was originally published in Eberron, Rising from the Last War, and then republished in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And before we cover the mechanics of the subclass, let's take a look at the lore behind these artificers. Armies require protection, and someone has to put things together if defenses fail. A combination of protector and medic, a battlesmith is an expert at defending others and repairing both material and personnel. To aid in their work, battlesmiths are accompanied by a steel defender, a protective companion of their own creation. Many soldiers tell stories of nearly dying before being saved by a battlesmith and a steel defender. In the world of Eberron, battlesmiths played a key role in House Cannith's work on battle constructs in the original Warforged, and after the last war, these artificers led efforts to aid those who were injured in the war's horrific battles. Alright, now to the mechanics. The first thing you get when you take this subclass is a tool proficiency. When you adopt this specialization at 3rd level, you gain proficiency with smith's tools. If you already have proficiency, you gain proficiency with one other type of artisan's tools of your choice. As far as tool proficiencies goes, smith's tools aren't the worst tool proficiency to gain, but they are fairly circumstantial. Being able to create or repair armors or weapons may come up in a more gritty campaign, but otherwise you won't see it very often. However, it really helps uplift you as a battlesmith from a thematic standpoint. I give this feature a 2 out of 5. It isn't doing much for you mechanically, but it does enable some corner case scenarios, and the tool proficiencies could be a lot worse. Either way, we get a lot more at 3rd level, so let's take a look at what else we get. Next up, we have Battlesmith spells. Starting at 3rd level, you always have certain spells prepared after you reach a particular level in this class, as shown in the Battlesmith spells table. These spells count as Artificer spells for you, and they don't count against the number of Artificer spells you prepare. At 3rd level, you get Shield and Heroism. At 5th, you get Branding Smite and Warding Bond. 9th, Aura of Vitality and Conjure Barrage. 13th, you get Aura of Purity and Fire Shield, and finally at 17th level you get Brandishing Smite and Mass Cure Wounds. Heroism is an okay spell, but it's not one that I would regularly use unless you know in-world that the creature has the potential to have a frightening effect. Shield is actually a really powerful and useful spell, though you will have to give a lot of thought on when you will use it since you don't have a crazy amount of spell slots. That being said, if you have good threat assessment, this can really save you in a pinch and get your AC up to some pretty high levels thanks to AC buffing infusions, shields, and medium armor proficiency. Branding Smite is useful for adding a bit of damage, but conflicts heavily with commanding your companion that you also get at this level. And Warding Bond sounds fairly good in theory, but I personally would rather have the effect be inverted. I'd like to give half my damage to a beefier ally like a barbarian or a fighter or even my steel defender companion than to be taking that damage for another character or my companion. You only get a D8 after all as a battlesmith, so your HP won't be incredibly high. Aura of Vitality isn't bad, but in most cases I'd rather use my bonus action to attack with my defender, rather than handing out a measly 2d6 hit points to one creature at the additional cost of an action, a 3rd level spell slot, and concentration. Conjure Barrage is pretty cool and feels very battlesmithian vibe, and will be really nice in a combat with a lot of fairly low hit point enemies. The best part is it's always prepared, so you don't have to try to predict those combats ahead of time. Aura of Purity isn't a bad spell at all and doesn't compete with your bonus action after initial cast like Aura of Vitality. It can really help in a pinch with some of the nastiest conditions in the game. Fire Shield is a pretty darn cool spell, granting you resistance of either cold or fire, and you get to dish out damage when you are hit by an enemy of the opposite type you have resistance from. It also doesn't require concentration. I really like that inclusion. Brandishing Smite is a really neat way to deal some extra damage and have spot removal of an enemy from combat if it has a few enough hit points. Lastly, Mass Cure Wounds can be extremely helpful if some of your allies have fallen unconscious in combat. This spell can pop them right back up. However, the saddest part about this spell is that it has no effect on constructs, so there's not really any synergy with your Steel Defender. Overall, I give the added spell list a 3 out of 5. There are only a few real duds on here, but they are mostly in the early levels of play, where most people exclusively play D&D. If you actually see 15th and later level play, then I would give this list a 4 out of 5. Our next feature is Battle Ready. When you reach 3rd level, your combat training and your experiments with magic have paid off in 2 ways. You gain proficiency with martial weapons, and when you attack with a magic weapon, you can use your intelligence modifier instead of strength or dexterity modifier for the attack and damage rolls. Oh my goodness, yes! Being able to use your intelligence modifier to the attack and damage of your weapon is incredible. This feature is basically the main lifeblood of this archetype, as it makes you nearly single ability score dependent since you use your intelligence for your spells and your weapon attacks now. The only commitment to dexterity you should consider is getting a maximum of 14 so you can have a +2 AC with your medium armor. As for strength, you can dump that stat unless you're going to be hoarding all of your infusions, then you might have to worry a little bit about carrying capacity. Though if you are a powerful build class like Firbolgs or Goliaths, you don't have to worry about strength at all really. You also gain proficiencies with martial weapons, meaning you can be swinging around a great sword with your intelligence modifier, or pick up a halberd and extend your reach. I'm super happy that intelligence gets more love with the Artificer, and the Battlesmith enables a really awesome martial build with only intelligence. The only restriction here is that the weapon you are using needs to be magical. However, you're an Artificer, and that is so easy to accomplish with your infusions. Super cool ability that unlocks a ton of potential. I give it a 5 out of 5. Level 3 is just a gift that keeps on giving. The next feature is Steel Defender. Your tinkering has borne you a faithful companion, a Steel Defender. It's friendly to you and your companions, and it obeys your commands. See game statistics in the Steel Defender stat block, which uses your proficiency bonus in several places. You determine the creature's appearance and whether it has 2 legs or 4. Your choice has no effect on its game statistics. In combat, the Defender shares your initiative count, but it takes turns immediately after yours. It can move and use its reaction on its own, but the only action it takes on its turn is the dodge action, unless you take the bonus action on your turn to command it to take another action. That action can be one of its own in its stat block or some other action. If you're incapacitated, the Defender can take any action of its choice, not just dodge. If the mending spell is cast on it, it regains 2d6 hit points. If it has died within the last hour, you can use your Smith's tools as an action to revive it. Provided you are within 5 feet of it, you expend a spell slot of 1st level or higher. The Steel Defender returns to life after 1 minute with all its hit points restored. At the end of the long rest, you can create a new Steel Defender if you have Smith's tools with you. If you already have a Defender from this feature, the first one immediately perishes. The Defender also perishes if you die. Okay, so there's a lot to cover here, but it shares most of the companion text that WotC seems to be happy with, so I don't want to touch on that too much, but really quickly, I love how it only takes your bonus action to cause the Defender to attack or perform another action. I also really like that it can move and act on its own, even if you don't use your bonus action. It just has to take the dodge action to help defend itself. This is a great way to make companions, and I am glad WotC is sticking with it. Something unique to your Defender is that you can use the Mending cantrip to heal it 2d6 hit points, which is a huge boon and a good reason to take that spell. Though, keep in mind that Mending takes a whole minute to cast, so you can't spam this as much as it might seem like at first glance. Being able to revive the Defender with a 1st level spell slot or taking a long rest is insanely powerful. Getting another sizable chunk of HP to divert from you and your allies that is pretty expendable is seriously good. Now for the stat block. The Defender has Vigilant, which means it can't be surprised. This means that your Defender will always have its reaction and potentially be able to pop off its Deflect attack ability. Speaking of Deflect attack, I love that the Defender has this ability, as it helps keep the combat loop interesting and tactical, and imposing disadvantage can be pretty powerful. Additionally, the Defender's normal attack deals 1d8 plus proficiency bonus force damage, which is pretty much the best damage type to be dealing in the game, as it's pretty much never resisted or granted immunity from. Lastly, it has a self-heal ability that you can use 3 times a day. The only real downside is that the Defender doesn't have a climb, swim, or fly speed, meaning that there are going to be some situations where it really bogs you down. though it is super easy to conjure up another one if you don't have a way to get it up the cliffside. However, that leads to some pretty sad moments where you leave your buddy behind. I give this ability a 5 out of 5. You get an insane amount of value. Our next feature is our all reliable extra attack. Starting at 5th level, you can attack twice rather than once whenever you take the attack action on your turn. Very nice. I would love to see the Bladesinger text here, which reads, "Moreover, you can cast one of your cantrips in the place of one of those attacks, as you do gain access to those juicy sword cantrips, Green Flame Blade, and Booming Blade, as being part of an Artificer." However, extra attack is still pretty darn good. I love to swing my greatsword or battle axe twice. 4 out of 5. Amazing ability, but conflicts a bit with the blade cantrips if you are interested in them. Before we move on to our next feature, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for getting this far in the video. If you have gained any value from it thus far and you'd like to see more of my content, please consider subscribing. It helps out the channel a lot. If not, that's totally okay. Thank you for watching anyway. Next up, we have Arcane Jolt. At 9th level, you learn new ways to channel arcane energy to harm or heal. When either you hit a target with a magic weapon attack, or your Steel Defender hits a target, you can channel magical energy through the strike to create one of the following effects. The target takes an extra 2d6 force damage, or you choose one creature or object you can see within 30 feet of the target. Healing energy flows into the chosen recipient, restoring 2d6 hit points to it. You can use this energy a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier, minimum of once, but you can do so no more than once a turn. You regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. By now you should either be at an 18 or maybe even a 20 intelligence, meaning that you can do this about 4 or 5 times per day. I really do wish the healing or the damage was 2d8, but I understand that's a bit greedy. It is really nice to add the extra damage onto criticals as you do double the dice. Alternatively, you can use the healing to pop up a dying ally for free. Overall, I love that you have the flexibility to choose between two simple yet very effective options. I also like that the result can be either you or your Steel Defender, giving you greater flexibility and helping enforce the idea that you are working in tandem with your companion. It is also super nice that you don't need to use a reaction to pop this ability off, leaving you and your Steel Defender free to make opportunity attacks and allowing your defender to deflect attacks. I give this feature a 5 out of 5. You won't be using it all day, but if you save it for when it's really effective, it'll produce some good work. Our final feature is called Improved Defender. At 15th level, your Arcane Jolt and Steel Defender become more powerful. The extra damage and the healing of your Arcane Jolt both increase to 4d6. Your Steel Defender gains a +2 bonus to armor class. Whenever your Steel Defender uses its deflect attack, the attacker takes force damage equal to 1d4 plus your intelligence modifier. As you can probably tell, these are mostly a bunch of little bonuses that help with scaling and quality of life. I'm really glad that Arcane Jolt scales, as it will likely be much less useful at this level without the increased damage or healing. The added AC is much needed to make sure your defender isn't getting constantly hit with devastating effects and attacks that whittle down its HP too quickly. The most interesting aspect of this feature is the added damage to deflect attack. You really should have a 20 intelligence at this point in your Artificer career, so the 1d4 plus 5 damage on top of imposing disadvantage is nice, but an average of 7.5 damage once per turn isn't going to be game-changing. As your final feature, I wish it was a bit more interesting, though this isn't necessarily bad. I give this feature a 4 out of 5. Overall, this subclass is really freaking cool, and it offers so much. You get spellcasting, you get to swing big stuff, or shoot bows with your intelligence, you get a little mechanical buddy, and you get to create magical items. I love it. The Artificer is one of my favorite classes in the game, and it really shines here both thematically and mechanically, which is why I give the Battlesmith Artificer a perfect score of a 5 out of 5 when compared to other Artificer subclasses. Though I'd love to hear what you think in the comments down below. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased and I really do like this Artificer subclass. Do you think I was a little too nice on it, or do you think that it is a perfect out of 5? I'd love to hear down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you on your next short rest. I also wanted to give a super big shout out to those supporting me on Patreon. Those of local hero tier or higher are Robert Allen Klaus III and Painted Sky. Thank you so much.